Hello again, Mang. I'm gonna read a book again, and this one is The Sandy Shoreline by Emma Rose Sparrow. Chapter 1. I hadn't been to the beach in years. It may have even been a decade or so. So why was the beach even on my mind? I can't really tell you. Maybe I had seen a commercial that showed the shoreline. Or maybe, somewhere in the back of my mind, I remembered the beach from long ago. All I can tell you is that one cool spring morning, I had an overwhelming urge to see the coastline. I barely remembered what it all looked like, or what smells it held. Because of course, the beach has a unique smell of its own. And I decided that today would be the day to visit it. Summertime is the popular season for the beach goers. Not many people venture there in the cool springtime. But I didn't mind. I didn't need a crowd. I just wanted to explore a bit. It took quite a while to get ready. But that's okay. I wasn't in a hurry. The weather forecast was for clear skies all day. Perfect. No need to race impending rain. While the sun wouldn't be strong enough to warrant the need for sunscreen, I did bring my sun hat. Why not? Even though I'd be just about the only person there at this time of the year, I might as well look the part. I'll spare you all the details of how long it took me to get ready, or the hustle and bustle of actually getting there. The important thing is that I did indeed arrive, and it was better than I had remembered, and more enchanting than I had envisioned. Chapter 2. Nothing quite like it. I slowly got out of the car, grasping my sun hat. It was time for a much anticipated inhalation of ocean air. It woke up my nose, that's for sure. It was a pleasant, briny blend of salt and seaweed. The combination of sea plants and salt in the air was almost tangible. Despite the breeze, the consistency stayed the same. No matter which direction the wind blew, the delightfully weighted scent of the ocean was there. It was invigorating and cleansing. If that were all that there was, if there were no more to be smelled, or nothing to be seen, I think I would have been perfectly content. Just those refreshing breaths were enough to plaster a smile on my face. But oh, there was so much more to see. I turned my attention to the entrance of the beach. The sandy pathway was protected by grassy dunes on either side. It was a gradual incline that hid the view of the ocean. That was all right. I would see it soon. Countless footprints peppered the sandy path. Seeing those imprints set my imagination on fire. Had a group of people run up the dune? Did smaller groups of families take the path throughout several days? I gave it some thought. I even let out an audible After a minute, I made up my mind, even though my guess was wild and completely unprovable. Many individuals trekked here alone. Each single person on their own private journey contributed to this mishmash of prints. They were all like me, lone adventurers. Okay, maybe adventurers was not the right word. Perhaps curiosity seekers with a need for new scenery for a day better fit the bill. With that decided, I looked over the rest of the entrance. Weathered wooden posts stood stoically on the sides of the inviting trail. The brilliant blue sky hung above. A scattering of small white clouds dotted the sky. It was a splendid scene. I stood and listened closely to see if I would be able to hear the waves of the ocean. I couldn't hear them. The crest of the sand dune must have buffered the noise. No matter, I enjoyed not seeing or hearing everything all at once. I prefer to take in one thing at a time, and I appreciate the joy of discovery. There was no rush to the day. I placed my sun hat on my head and began my walk up the pathway. With deep breaths to pull in the salty sea air, I looked forward to what would come next. Chapter 3. The Tour Guide. I had made it just about halfway up the pathway when I paused. While I certainly could have used a break to rest my legs and catch my breath, I stopped for another reason. A vibrant kee, kee had called out to me. It sounded cheerful and amused. For a second, I almost thought that maybe someone was snickering at me. I turned to look and see who was there, and it was not a person. There to my right, I had a greeter of another sort, and he wasn't laughing at me. He was just speaking in his own distinct language. It was a herring gull, which is a type of seagull. I knew that it was a herring gull and not another sort of gull because he was quite robust and beefy. I also noticed that this was an adult herring gull, since younger ones have brown mottling on their feathers. By the age of 4 years, they reach maturity, as this one seemed to be. He had a proud stance and looked quite serious. I imagined that perhaps he thought that this beach belonged to him. However, he continued looking at me and actually gave me a tiny nod. I do believe that this was meant to say, "Welcome and come on in." I gave him a joking salute as if to say, "Thank you, my kind sir," and continued on my way. As I walked, this herring gull hopped along my side. Maybe this greeter was also planning to be my tour guide. Chapter 4. Top of the Crest. With a few more steps, I reached the top crest of the winding sandy path. What a sight! Mother Nature in all of her glory creates many beautiful scenes. This had to be one of her finest works. The sanded trail gave away as the grassy dunes split to the side. Ahead was a stretch of flawless, sugary soft sand, and that sand ebbed its way to the sparkling sea. The smaller clouds that I had seen before had now converged, and in a perfect way, as if an artist wanted to place a few final touches on a masterpiece. They hung in the cobalt sky. They looked to be gently strewn pieces of cotton. From where I stood, I could see that the ocean was calm, and from this distance, I could hear the soft roll of the waves. It reminded me of the splashy sound of water in a bathtub. I was deciding if I would go left, go right, or head straight to the sea when my new tour guide friend interrupted me. "Kee, kee," he softly urged. He took a few little hops, keeping his gaze on me. Then he stood in place as if waiting for me to answer. While I know that it was silly to take the advice of a bird, I wanted to play along. After all, I didn't really come equipped with a plan. I figured, why not? As he teetered along toward the soothing sea, I followed. Chapter 5. 2 Peapod Eyes. The herring gull, my impromptu tour guide, had stopped his trek just as I was thinking that I needed to take a short rest. He had that serious look about him again. I followed his gaze down to the sand, and then I saw what had piqued his interest. I can only say 2 things about this discovery. 1, I really hoped that my tour guide wouldn't eat what we had just found. And 2, this was one of the cutest things I had ever seen on the beach. It was the most adorable little sand crab. It wasn't much bigger than my thumb. Its soft tiny body was a creamy orange, and its mouth was shaped in such a way that it actually seemed to be smiling. But the most endearing quality about this little creature were the two pitch black peapod eyes. Those eyes almost looked as if they were glued on during a craft project. It was simply charming. Out of protective instinct, I held out my hand and told the herring gull to stay back. While crabs are indeed on the menu for all sorts of seagulls, I wouldn't let any harm come to this one. The herring gull kept a respectful distance, and I leaned over to have a closer look at this amazing little guy. I was lucky to have the chance to inspect this tiny beach creature. Most sand crabs spend their time hidden beneath shifting sands. When they come out to eat, they often emerge close to the crashing waves. Once there, they keep most of their body hidden under the sand, with just their eyes and mouth exposed and facing towards the water. When a wave comes crashing down on them, they feast on a tiny plankton that is carried in the seawater. I could have stayed for a while to stare at this pint-sized crab, but in a blink of an eye, it was gone. It had darted under the sand, and just in time too. The herring gull bopped back to where I was and let out another kee, kee. I guess he wanted to continue on, and so did I. Chapter 6. 5 Barnacled Arms. As I followed the herring gull toward the salty waters, I realized that the sand had become moist. It was more tightly packed together, and this made it easier to walk over. Looking at the imprints of tides that had washed up over the sand, I surmised that high tide was over. It was low tide, and that would be good. I wouldn't have to worry about waves crashing closer and closer. Instead, they would be gradually receding back into the ocean. While the herring gull urged me closer with this inquisitive expression, I stopped for a moment. Something had caught my eye. I almost thought that I was looking at some type of children's toy at first, but no. The most incredible starfish lay in the wet sands. Frothy, foamed seawater just barely edged up at it. However, with the tide retreating, it would not be swept back into the ocean. I carefully picked it up to examine it. There are almost 2,000 different species of starfish, but I had never seen one like this before. It was almost as if someone had colored it with a bright crayon. There were 5 curled barnacled arms, though I read before that it's not always so. Some starfish can have up to 12 arms. By the looks of this amazing creature, I wanted to call it a crustacean. But starfish and sun stars are actually echinoderms. Other creatures in the echinoderm family are sea urchins and sea cucumbers. The intensity of its flushed pink hue just about had me mesmerized. With a smile, I placed it back onto the pebbly sand. My eyes stayed glued to it as I took a few steps backward. Chapter 7. Nature's Trumpet. I walked backwards for a few more steps. The hypnotic pink starfish still had my attention. Just as I was about to place another foot down, my heart jumped out of my chest. Unlike the normal soft call of the herring gull, the bird suddenly let out a loud shriek. It had startled me, to say the least. I was about to ask, "Why in the world did you do that?" Turning and looking down, I received my answer. There in the sand, right where my foot would have landed if it were not for the bird's warning, sat a conch shell. It was huge. Thank goodness I didn't step on it or stumble over it. It was propped up as if on display. It stood at the very edge of where the water began to lap at the sand. It may have been the largest conch shell that I'd ever seen in person. It was a soft cream with golden touches. The inner shell was a cool, muted pink. Simple, beautiful. Conch shells have been used for different purposes over many centuries. It appears in the artwork of the ancient Mayan people. The Mayans used this type of shell as a paint holder and as an adornment. It is also used as a musical instrument in some countries. The fishermen of Grenada use it as a trumpet to signal that fresh fish is available. In Guadeloupe, conch shells are blown like horns near ports at dawn. Shells like these are also sometimes used as a building material in place of bricks. Most interesting of all, there are several cultures that use it as a symbol for saying it is your turn. Some use it to say it's your turn to make tea. Other cultures pass it on from one person to another to signal it's your turn to speak when in a large group. I thought about taking it home with me. It was large enough that I could use it as a small planter. As I was debating this with myself, the herring gull let out another kee, kee. Thankfully, it was his normal friendly call again. When I looked over to him, he was nodding his head toward the ocean, and I understood why he wanted me to pay attention to it. Chapter 8: Flawless Masterpiece. Cool, foamy waves were rolling in over the grainy sand. Each small breaker tumbled over itself, splashing across the sand with a dampened rumble. Within a breath, it was gently pulled back out, only to be replaced by another. The calming, rhythmic sprays had me entranced. It was soothing and peaceful and relaxing. It was the most picturesque sight of the day. Or at least that's what I thought until I looked up. There before me was the most spectacular sunset that I could have ever envisioned. The sapphire sky blended down into a crimson orange. A line of parting clouds allowed the fired yellow sun to hover just over the horizon. Every sparkle and shimmer of cascading light reflected off of the iridescent ocean waters. It was simply breathtaking. Time stood still. I imagined that I was absorbed into the most fantastic of paintings, part of nature's masterpiece. Then, I realized that I actually was indeed part of it. The herring gull, the sand crab, the outrageously pink starfish, the conch shell, the sand and the surf, the remarkable sunset. Everything was all connected, all part of life's creation. And I, standing there upon the beach, was part of it as well. We are all essential pieces of the world, each fitting in as we are meant to. The herring gull soared off. I took one last look at the sunset before starting my journey back home. It was then that I felt so very thankful for both my shoreline journey and the reminder that we are all part of something beautiful. I hope you like it, Mang, and God bless. Bye.